Okay, Art, when you first started UFC, did you realize the impact that wrestling was actually going to have on it? I know that you knew Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was going to have a huge impact, but even now, if you look at all the best fighters in every weight class, they're all wrestlers. Started with a wrestling background. Did you realize how big wrestling was going to be?
First of all, it's in the book, I tried calling Dan Gable, University of Iowa. Couldn't get him. I'm trying his assistant, Tom Brands. He doesn't return my call. What I had seen was, at the Gracie Academy, Rorion Gracie had a 30-minute videotape of Mark Schultz rolling with Rickson Gracie.
Yeah.
And it took him 30 minutes to get Mark's arm. And I asked Rorion about it, and he said, the wrestlers, they don't have any submission. So early on, I knew that we had to get wrestlers in. Rorion was very casual about, he said, the wrestlers, they don't know any submissions. But I understood it early on. So I was glad I could bring Severin in. That was my first.
Yep.
Then later on, the Mark Colemans, the Mark Kerrs. Later on, Mark Schultz, Kevin Jackson, Randy Couture.
Yeah.
But no, to answer your question, I understood early on. I wished I could have gotten Alexander Karelian. And of course, the Kowalski brothers told me, you got as much chance of getting him as you got a Mike Tyson out of prison.
And there's a lot of great wrestlers overseas that we never see that actually be amazing MMA guys, but the stature of wrestling is way different. They're national icons.
Yes.
When they win gold medals, like they're taking care for the rest of their lives. So why fight for a couple $100,000 even when they make millions of dollars doing nothing and being now like Alexander Karelian? He's part of the Politburo. He's in Parliament.
Yep.
This whole piece. So it's
a
very
national
difficult.
treasure.
Yeah. Now, you watched a lot of different fights, even after you sold the UFC.
Yes.
Do you like today's rules better than the old Pride rules or even the old UFC rules? Which rules do you like better? Knowing for sure that the rules are never going to go backwards. The rules are the way they are. Nothing's going to change. We're not going to see knees to the ground at opponent. It's never going to change. The battle is always, I talk to people all the time, I want to see knees come back. I want to see, stomp, soccer kicks and stomps.
Right.
That stuff's it's not going to happen. Yeah. But what rules did you like? As the originator of this, what rules did you like?
Kind of favored the Pride rules, and I liked it done in a boxing ring. And when I talk to fighters about it, I know why.
Yeah. You have to be a real fighter to fight in a boxing ring. You have to really understand how to move your feet, how to move sideways, how to move back and forth, and get out of the ropes and be on a good conditioning. In the cage, you kind of lean against the cage and press it. It changes the game a little bit. But I understand too what the UFC is doing by trying to be something completely different and trying to push it within the cage rules, and of course fighting in both.
Yes.
My preference, obviously, one of my best fights I ever had was fighting Mayhem Miller inside the ring. Over in Hawaii underneath the old Pride rules. That was one of my best fights I ever had. But also too, the two most known fights that I'm known for is fighting Matt Hughes inside that cage, and we never hit the cage wall.
Yes.
It's just how those fights worked out. If you had a shot to buy back the UFC and take it over again, say Lorenzo and Danny came and gave you a price, and you had the investors, you could take it over, what would you change? What's the first thing that you would change? Besides the staff, and I get, new owner comes in, you fire everybody off. I get all that. But what would you change about the UFC right now, if anything at all?
I think that there has to be more emphasis on the amateur situation. And I think that as the category leader, the UFC could be doing more and should be doing more. If the UFC were mine, MMA is not being taught in the schools. They teach kendo and judo in Japan. And, football, baseball, basketball, and hockey all get taught in schools. I think that we need more of a footprint on amateur MMA. And if the UFC were mine, I would probably be doing more in that area in terms of building tomorrow's fighter. Because I think we've only seen the beginning of where we're going with the evolution of fighting and fighters, period.
Everybody in this room right now owes you their jobs. To be honest with you. From Charlie sitting across the table to Joe Ferraro just left from Sportsnet up in Canada. We all owe you our jobs. I myself probably owe you more of a debt than anybody else because you gave wrestlers an ability to do something. I tried to make the world team. I tried to be the number one guy. It didn't happen for me. I had Brandon Slay and Joe Williams in front of me, so I could never get over the hump. It just wasn't going to happen. But you gave me a spot to make money. Now we're seeing a lot more wrestlers jumping in. Do you have a concern at all that now these great judo players are jumping out of judo as soon as they can to get over to mixed martial arts because they can make money as opposed to competing in judo? Wrestlers are leaving the world team to come over and fight in MMA because like guys like Ben Askren and Daniel Cormier, they wrestled for a little while, but they could have kept wrestling, but they realized there's a lot more money to be made over fighting now. Does that concern you at all that something that you built is now hurting other sports, hurting other original martial arts?
It does give me pause because I do see that process happening, and I do see that there's a cannibalization there. On the other hand, as purses go up, as fighter fees go up, as appearance fees go up, we're going to see that type of thing happen more and more. Years ago, they used to talk about all the great boxers that really should have been football players in the NFL, but boxing, took them and put them in a ring and put gloves on them. I think you're seeing that similar process happen with MMA.
It's always been my stature that I'm one of the lucky 2%. 95% of the men in the world want to do what we do. 5% of the men in the world can actually do what we do, and only 2% of the men in the world can actually do it well. And I'm lucky enough to fall into that category. Do you see this in this new generation of guys? Because at my gym in downtown LA, I get guys that come in all the time, and they go, in 6 months I'll be in the UFC, and a year from now I'll be the UFC champ. Well, what have you done? I watched a lot of YouTube videos.
Right.
All right. Okay, at first I thought it was a little crazy, then I realized that's not the craziness. That is the reality of it, because every weekend is another fight to go to or to watch on TV. Do you see that happening as well? That there's almost an overswell of too much? There's too much saturation now of so many events going on at one time that too many people think they can do it that really shouldn't be doing it?
You bring up a very good point, and I've heard that a lot during this International Fight Week, this Fight Expo week. I've heard it from several people saying virtually the same thing. Has there been too great a profusion of events, and is that actually hurting maybe the sport in some respects? I think you bring up a very good point in that a lot of people think that if I watch this by osmosis, somehow I'm getting it. And of course, as you know, you need to go in and put the hard work into the gym. So I think that we're seeing, as the commercialization, the proliferation of the sport is seducing people who really need to pay their dues. I think that's an ongoing problem.
I call it the elitist, the entitled generation. We have a really bad deal right now with our younger generation where they believe that, you drop your iPhone, you don't fix the screen, you just go buy a new iPhone. My grandparents, when the tire blew, my grandfather didn't take it into the shop. He fixed the damn tire himself. So they have this whole process of when something's broke, they fix it.
Right.
We're now dealing with a bunch of children that are coming up, and I call them children because I'm 42 and they're freaking 23, that they believe that they should be the owners and the managers of the restaurants they work in. They believe they should already be at the top of the game. They just graduated college. They should be at that space. And these guys come in and they go, I should be at the top end. It worked for John Jones.
Right.
He was right place, right time. Right. He slides in there. Rashad Evans gets hurt, has to pull out. All of a sudden, John Jones is in. Next thing you know, he's John Jones is John Jones.
Right. But it's the exception rather than the rule.
Yes, he's the exception rather than the rule. Do you worry about this new generation coming in and it's evolved so much now that a lot of the guys coming in, this next set that's coming in, all they've ever done is MMA. They weren't wrestlers. They weren't football players that made a transition. They're not boxers that are making the transition. These guys, all they did is MMA. They did everything in MMA from a very young age, and now they're able to start transitioning into it. Do you think that game of where they believe that they should be at the top end of the game right now is going to hurt our sport at all? Or do you think it's actually going to build a little bit benefit because these guys come in believing, I'm fighting this guy, he's beneath me, he's a number 10 guy, I'm the number 9 guy, but I should be fighting number 3 guy.
Right.
Do you think it's going to help our sport, or do you think it's going to hurt our sport in the end?
I think it's actually going to hurt our sport. In fact, I remember that Lorenzo at the UFC 20th anniversary show, we were having a drink together, and he said, you had it easy in the old days. It's because guys were fighting to prove their art, and there wasn't a lot of money involved at the time. He said, today, you ought to see the prima donnas that I've got to deal with.
Yeah,
so,
right.
In all fairness, I think that this entitlement generation that you referred to, Frank, is you put your finger right on the key problem, and I think to some extent it has a detrimental effect on the sport.
What is your relationship? We touched on it a little bit before, the relationship with the UFC. Is it good? Are they trying to bring you in to help them at all, or talk to you at all, or is it just keep a relationship of, hey Dana, hey Lorenzo, hey Art, how you doing? And just kind of pass each other in the street?
They've been friendly and they've been very gracious. They asked for 25 books, which we had delivered to them last week. I thought that was interesting. And I went over and signed a few of them, and Mark Ratner, my old friend from the Nevada State Athletic Commission, who's now the Vice President of Government Relations, came out and said, where's mine? And I want your autograph right now. So I think that my relationship with the UFC is one that they feel comfortable after 12 years and with what they've done, that I don't represent any sort of a threat in any way to them. I think that they're proud of what we had done, some of us old school guys, and I think their gracious gesture to bring me there last November showed that their head is in the right place, and so is mine. So today, to answer your question, I think it's been a pretty darn good relationship.
I kind of equate it to your child. UFC is your child. You raise your child, send them off to college, and they got picked up by a company. The UFC came and picked up that company, and then now you're looking at your child going, holy crap, he went from small beginnings, the humble, we're just trying to figure this whole thing out. So all of a sudden, $2 billion worth, $2 billion company, which is more than the New York Yankees. So this is a huge deal. It's a lot of money. Do you have any regrets of letting it go so quickly? Because I know. Trust me, I know the back end story. I know what was going on really. I know the guys that should have been involved, they got X'd out because they brought the deal together and people got pushed out. I get how international American business, especially when you're dealing with guys who are so business savvy as the Fertittas, that understand the value of a penny, not just the value of the dollar. They get this piece, this one penny right now, in 10 years from now is going to cost us $1 million.
Yes.
We have to get rid of it right now. Let's not deal with it.
They're very smart.
They're very foresight seeing, which amazes me, especially because I live here. And I go to the casinos, and they treat me like I'm a god when I walk in. It's just Frank Trigg they're treating like a god. I didn't realize they treat every local like a god because they want them to feel special. Do you have any regret of letting it go so quickly, realizing now that if you just held on to a little bit longer and got some more people to come in and help and you got the right team put together to kind of make it build, you could have been a $2 billion company?
Well, you know what's interesting is that we had as our financial source at the time BMG, Bertelsmann's Music Group, so it isn't as if we didn't have access to money. On the other hand, the politicians were screaming pretty loud, along with the press, the media, for our heads. I joke about the fact that it was like the Frankenstein scene in the movie where at the castle at the end, the villagers are showing up with the burning brands. Yeah. And I think, hindsight's always 20/20. And I've told the story a number of times, and I've come up with the line that I sold $1 billion business for $1 million.
Is that something to be proud of? I'm not sure. The Jew in me is really trying to figure this out. I don't really know. This is really close. I don't. Million. Yeah, right.
But hindsight's 20/20. At the time, it seemed like the right thing, and I felt at the time that getting out while the getting was good, because I saw that there was a good chance that they were going to shut the whole thing down. And remember, they did ban it completely on pay-per-view in 1997. John McCarthy and Bob Meyerowitz and I flew to Denver to meet with Leo Hendry and spent a whole day with him. And Leo's an ex-Marine like me, and he said, Art, you're going to try to tell me that this isn't hand-to-hand fighting, what you're doing? Come on. He said, we knew when we went back to the airport that night, Meyerowitz looked at me and said, he's going to ban it. I said, Bob, it's a done deal. So to answer your question, the handwriting was so much on the wall. Think about by UFC 5, we were hiring civil and criminal attorneys to run the event.
Oh, okay.
How about Steve Jenham comes up to me in that show and says, I'm a sworn officer in Oklahoma, in Nebraska, in Omaha. And the police are telling me that if I fight in this event tomorrow night, I could be arrested for battery. I'll lose my badge. He said, Art, what do I do? So I saw that we were, under tremendous pressure. The judge had basically banned closed fist punching in Detroit when we were there at Cobo. In fact, when I left Detroit, there was an article in the newspaper saying that if Art Davie comes back, we've got a court order to arrest him because he allowed those people to punch. Mark Schultz threw 41 unanswered punches at Big Daddy Goodrich's head. So to answer your question, Frank, we were under tremendous pressure. I thought at the time, get out while the getting's good.
And it makes complete sense, and I can understand that because it does become a financial burden. And really, do you want to ride the wave for 10 years? The Fertittas had to ride the wave for 10 years. They had to sit there and
as you know, Frank, they took a lot of tough hits between 2001 and 2005 and a half. Until that second season of The Ultimate Fighter came along, really, they were bleeding red ink.
Because everyone forgets that they paid for that first season of The Ultimate Fighter to be on the air. And people don't realize that it costs a lot of money. Not only produce it, put it together, edit it, get those fighters in the house, have all this stuff put together, and then, boom, put it on TV. It was expensive.
I give Frank and Lorenzo, with knowing and understanding the gaming business, a lot of credit, and they understand the value of penny, like you say, that they put up $10 million on the table and said, we're going to take a chance. We know that if we get that show, we've got the vehicle then to create the heroes and the villains for the pay-per-view, and we're going to do it. And we're going to take a chance and prove to Spike that this will work. And they were already $40 million upside down.
Yeah.
Talk about guts.
Being $40 million upside down and dumping another $10 million into it to see what happens.
That takes guts.
And then, a lot of the guys, I'm right in that middle generation. I'm right after the first guys. I came in the second wave. There wasn't much money for my generation. A few guys made money. The Hugheses and those guys, and Liddells and the Ortizes, those guys made a lot of money. But my guys were middle of the road, average at best, so we didn't make that much money. These guys now at average at best are making double what I was making at the same time frame. but there's so much more to be made. But the UFC still is kind of paying themselves back.
Yes.
The main guy, they're still kind of, I get it's a $2 billion a year company, but the expansion is so fast.
Yes.
There is so much saturation. They're having such an issue with getting England put together, trying to get back into Japan, getting China put together.
Trying to get New York.
Making sure they're not getting controlled out. Still battling in New York. They finally got Ontario up in Canada.
Right.
Approved this whole game. We were just in Vancouver. Vancouver's talking about not having back there again. It's a bad venue. Like it's all these issues that they're dealing with. They're just now getting to a point where they're able to say, we're kind of flush. We're not really flush. We're kind of flush because all the prima donnas are coming in saying now they want $2 per pay-per-view, not $1.
Right.
These guys, and they want it from pay-per-view 1, not pay-per-view 20, not pay-per-view 200,000.
Right.
So it becomes this whole game that gets played.
Yeah.
What do you think is the next evolution of the UFC? Because we keep seeing this evolution of fighters. And we saw now we have the UFC Fight Pass, this whole internet-based whole group that's coming
About 100,000 subscribers at this point.
What do you think the next evolution, if you had to guess, unless you know already and want to break it on, what's the next evolution you think the UFC is going to advance to? Because you're such a smart guy. You knew what they were going to do once they took it and started putting money into it and started developing. You kind of knew where everything was going.
Well, Frank, that's a really interesting question, and there's some things that I could say, but I really am not in a position to say today that
You
I
say whatever the hell you want.
Well,
No one listens to me. No one at all pays attention to anything I have to put out there. And trust me, it'll be out in 3 days, and everything you're going to say now will already be announced anyway, so it's fine.
No, I think that there's some things coming that I think will be interesting and revolutionary. Hey, look, I think it's interesting that Scott Coker is now over at Bellator, and maybe they're opening up that checkbook. They're getting away from the tournaments. They're willing now maybe to hire some ex-UFC fighters. I think it could be really interesting. On the other hand, when I found out that Major League Baseball sent a team over to China and they found 40 guys who had never played baseball who could throw the ball at 90 miles an hour, you got to realize that China and India, and the UFC's international expansion is just beginning. I mean, you're going to get some guys coming out of China in the next 10 to 15 years. It'll be like, where did these guys come from?
Dana White in his absolute asinine craziness said at one point he wants to throw 100 fights a year and have 6 fights in one night, which basically be over a 48-hour period because of time change, whatever.
Yeah.
We're tapping on that right now. We all thought he was nuts when he said it, and by God, everything he says, it actually comes true. They're doing 2 and 3 fights now in a weekend without a problem. They're doing, in Vegas, they're running 4 fights. They ran, which I ref last night. They ran Tough Enough.
Right.
Their line fights tonight is part of the fight week. Then they have the pay-per-view on Saturday night, and then they have the Frank Yeager BJ Penn fight on Sunday night.
Right.
So it's 4 events that they're technically all part of in one weekend. How soon do you think we're going to actually see 100 fights in a year from the UFC with everything put together and 5 or 6 fights in one weekend? You think it's going to be something happening in the next 6 months? Or you think we're still a couple years away from that?
I think it's closer than you think.
My bid is 90 days. I think we're gonna see that. We're gonna see that bid in about 90 days. They're gonna make the announcement within the next 90 days and make that announcement. We're gonna have these events, and they're not gonna say anything.
Right.
They're gonna say, "Here's the dates,"
Yep.
and all of us in the media are gonna go, "Hold on a second.
Wait a minute. Look at this.
Wait a minute. That means I have to get up Friday morning at 4 a.m. and I have to watch fights until Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. I'm stuck. I can't stop because there's gonna be fights ongoing. I really think we're gonna have that announcement about 90 days for that.
I think you got to give them a lot of credit. They understand how to be the brand leader, and the brand leader just keeps saying, "What other mountains do we need to climb right away?" And let's get there before everybody else does. They're very smart.
Yeah, incredibly smart, and being for a short period of time,
Very smart.
being on the inside and be able to be a part of it for me was amazing. And finally get a chance to sit down and talk with you has been great, Art. It's been a huge
I have
deal
one
for me.
question from you. Is it true that you worked in the same grocery back in New York as Jay Tan?
Yeah, Wegmans. We both worked at Wegmans. Jay Tan went to Brighton High School.
Is that right?
I was not at McQuaid High School, which was also in Brighton, but it's mine was a private Catholic school right down the street. We both worked at Wegmans Grocery. Wegmans is like the Fertitta Station Casinos. It's a top 20 company to work for in the country. It's one of those. It's funny that I've been a part of two organizations that are great to work for. Thanks, Art. I appreciate it, bud.
My pleasure, my friend.